My name is Morgan, and I'm 32 years old. I arrived early at my husband David's company launch party with butterflies in my stomach, not just because I was proud of him, but because tonight was the night I would finally reveal my secret. I'm the heir to the Hartwell billions. I've kept my true identity hidden from everyone, including my husband of 3 years. As I smoothed my designer dress, I overheard David's voice from around the corner. "She's so naive," he told his co-worker. "She has no idea what's really going on." Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If you've ever discovered a shocking secret that changed everything, hit that like and subscribe button. Now, grab a cup of coffee and listen to how my perfect life unraveled in a single evening. I was born Morgan Hartwell, the only grandchild of industrialist Joseph Hartwell. My grandfather built Hartwell Industries from a small machine shop into a global conglomerate worth billions. I never knew what it was like to want for anything materially, but emotionally that was a different story. My parents died in a boating accident when I was 15. One moment they were vibrant and alive, planning a summer vacation in Greece, and the next they were gone forever. I was left alone with my grief and a grandfather who, while loving, wasn't exactly equipped to raise a teenage girl. He tried his best, though, and between his awkward attempts at connection and the team of staff who helped raise me, I managed to grow up relatively well-adjusted, despite the trauma. Grandfather had strong opinions about money and relationships. "Money changes how people see you, Morgan," he would tell me. "They stop seeing you and only see what you can do for them." He'd experienced this firsthand, having been married and divorced twice to women who, as he put it, were more in love with the Hartwell name than the man who carried it. His lessons stuck with me. As I approached my college graduation from Princeton, I made a decision that shocked him. I wanted to live under an assumed name and make my own way in the world, not permanently, but long enough to know what it felt like to be valued for myself alone. "You can't escape who you are forever," Grandfather warned, but he respected my decision. We created a new identity for me, Morgan Taylor, a young woman with a modest background from Portland. I would have enough money to live comfortably, but not lavishly. The bulk of my inheritance and trust funds would remain untouched until I chose to reclaim my true identity. After college, I moved to Seattle and got a job as a graphic designer at a small creative agency. My apartment was nice but not extravagant. My car was practical rather than flashy. I made friends who knew nothing of my background, and for the first time in my life, I knew that people liked me for me. I met David on a rainy Tuesday at a local coffee shop. I was working on a client project when he asked if he could share my table. He was handsome in an accessible way, kind eyes, an easy smile, and a quiet confidence that was attractive without being arrogant. We started talking, and 1 hour turned into 3. David Williams was everything I'd been looking for. He came from a middle-class family in Michigan, had worked his way through college, and was now pursuing his dream of creating educational software that would make learning more accessible to underprivileged children. His passion was genuine, his values aligned with mine, and best of all, he had no idea who I really was. Our relationship progressed quickly. We went on dates to neighborhood restaurants, hiked in the mountains outside the city, and spent evenings talking about everything from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. For our 6-month anniversary, he saved up to take me to a nice restaurant, nervously checking the prices on the menu when he thought I wasn't looking. I found it endearing rather than amusing. This was what real life felt like: choices and trade-offs, not endless resources. After 18 months together, David proposed during a sunrise hike. The ring was modest but perfect. He apologized that it wasn't bigger, explaining that he was putting most of his savings into his business idea. I told him truthfully that I couldn't imagine a more beautiful ring. We planned a small wedding. I paid for most of it through my savings, but I was careful to keep everything modest enough that David wouldn't question how I could afford it. My grandfather attended as Mr. Joseph Hart, a family friend, giving me away with tears in his eyes. and whispering, "I hope you know what you're doing, my dear." I did know what I was doing, or at least I thought I did. I had a plan. I would give David time to establish his company based on his own merit, and then when the time was right, I would reveal who I truly was and use my resources to help his vision reach its full potential. It seemed perfect, a true partnership where both of us could contribute our strengths. The only problem was that I had no idea how to tell him that everything he knew about my background was a carefully constructed lie. So I kept waiting for the right moment, which somehow never seemed to arrive. The first 2 years of our marriage were largely happy ones. We settled into a cozy routine in our Seattle apartment, both working hard at our careers and enjoying our time together. David was fully focused on developing his educational software platform, often working late into the night coding, while I curled up nearby with a book or worked on freelance design projects. Behind the scenes, I was living a double life. While David thought I was just a moderately successful graphic designer, I was actually managing a vast investment portfolio through encrypted laptops and secret phone calls to my financial team. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had created this elaborate deception to find someone who loved me for myself, only to build my marriage on a foundation of lies. David's startup journey was more challenging than he had anticipated. The educational software market was competitive, and investors were hesitant to back an unknown founder with limited connections. I watched him make call after call, pitch after pitch, always returning home with the same determined expression despite the rejections. "They just don't see the vision yet," he would say, cracking open a beer and reviewing his business plan for the 100th time. "But they will." Each time he was rejected, I fought the urge to tell him the truth. With one phone call, I could provide all the funding he needed. But something held me back. Perhaps it was my grandfather's warnings, or perhaps it was my own fear that once David knew the truth, everything between us would change. Instead, I offered emotional support and practical help, designing his logo and marketing materials for free. "You'll find the right investor," I assured him, "someone who believes in your vision as much as I do." After 18 months of struggle, David finally caught a break. A venture capital group led by a woman named Rachel Peterson showed interest in his company. Rachel was known for taking chances on educational startups, and after several meetings, she agreed to provide seed funding. The night David secured the investment, we celebrated with champagne on our small balcony. "This is just the beginning," he promised, his eyes alight with excitement. "Everything we've dreamed about is going to happen now." I believed him, but I also noticed subtle changes in the following months. As his company grew from a one-man operation to a small team working out of a downtown office, David's hours got longer. He missed dinners, then weekends. His phone became an extension of his hand, and he began taking calls in the other room. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague. "Just boring business stuff," he'd say, or "You wouldn't be interested in the details." But I was interested not just because I had my own business acumen to share, but because I felt him slipping away. There were other small changes that nagged at me. New clothes, a different cologne, a gym membership he actually used. In another context, these might have been positive changes, but combined with his emotional distance, they planted seeds of doubt. One night, I woke at 2 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. I called his cell phone and he answered with background noise that sounded more like a bar than an office. "Just working late with the team," he explained. "Go back to sleep." "I'll be home soon." I tried to dismiss my suspicions as paranoia. David was working toward a major company launch. Of course, he was stressed and busy. This was his dream, and I needed to be supportive. Besides, I was hardly in a position to demand complete honesty from him when I was hiding such a significant part of myself. 6 months after securing the initial investment, David announced that his company was ready for its official launch. They had completed their first educational software suite and had pilot programs running in several schools. The launch event would bring together investors, education specialists, and tech media, a crucial moment for the company's future. "This is what we've been working toward," he told me, more animated than I'd seen him in months. "After this, everything changes." I decided this would be the perfect opportunity to finally reveal my identity. The timing felt right. David had proven he could build something valuable on his own merit, and now I could help take it to the next level. I imagined the look of shock and then joy on his face when he realized that his wife could provide the resources to expand his vision globally. I began making arrangements with my family's lawyers, preparing to transfer a significant investment into David's company. I practiced what I would say, how I would explain my deception, while emphasizing that my love for him had always been genuine. I even coordinated with the event planner to arrange a special moment during the evening when I could make my announcement. What I didn't know was that David had secrets of his own, and that they would be revealed before I could share mine. As the launch event approached, my excitement grew alongside my nervousness. After years of living a double life, I was finally going to unify my two identities and share my full self with my husband. I imagined David's surprise turning to understanding, then joy at the possibilities this would create for his company. I met with the family lawyers to prepare the documents for a substantial investment in David's company. My plan was to offer $10 million in initial funding, with the promise of more as the company expanded. The lawyers were concerned about protecting my interests, especially given that I hadn't signed a prenuptial agreement under my real identity. "Your grandfather won't be pleased about this oversight," my family's longtime attorney, Mr. Winters, warned. "Let me worry about grandfather," I replied. "Just have the documents ready for the announcement." Next came the question of what to wear. This would be a night of transformation, and I wanted my appearance to reflect that. I eventually selected a deep blue gown that was elegant without being ostentatious, paired with a simple diamond pendant that had belonged to my mother. Looking in the mirror, I saw both Morgan Taylor and Morgan Hartwell, and for the first time, the integration felt right. The day before the event, I visited my grandfather at his estate outside the city. At 82, he still had a commanding presence, though his health had begun to decline in recent years. We sat in his study, surrounded by photographs chronicling the growth of Hartwell Industries and our family over the decades. "So tomorrow's the big day," he said, pouring us each a small glass of his favorite scotch. "You're finally going to tell this husband of yours who you really are." "Yes," I confirmed. "It's time, grandfather." He studied me over his glass. "And you're certain about this?" "Once you make this announcement, there's no going back. The press will be all over it. Hartwell heiress marries startup founder. Your privacy will be gone." I hadn't considered the media angle as thoroughly as I should have. The Hartwell name still made headlines, especially in business circles. Our family's general policy was to keep a low profile with rare and carefully managed public appearances. "I understand the risks," I said with more confidence than I felt, "but I can't build a real marriage on a foundation of lies." Grandfather's expression softened. "You always were idealistic like your mother." He sighed heavily. "Just be careful, Morgan. I've seen what money does to people. It changes the equation." "David's not like that," I insisted. "He loves me for who I am. The problem is, my dear, he doesn't know who you are, not really, and people don't like feeling deceived even when the deception came from good intentions." His words stayed with me as I drove home, creating a small knot of anxiety in my stomach. Was I being naive? Should I have told David the truth from the beginning? I arrived home to find a note from David saying he'd be working late again and not to wait up. It was happening more frequently now, these late nights before the launch. I understood the pressure he was under, but I missed him. While hanging up his dry cleaning that evening, I found something in his jacket pocket, a small pearl earring that definitely wasn't mine. I stared at it sitting in my palm, the knot in my stomach tightening. There could be innocent explanations, I told myself. Maybe it belonged to someone at his office and got caught on his jacket. When David finally came home after midnight, I was waiting in the living room. He looked tired, but strangely energized, with bright eyes and flushed cheeks. "I thought you'd be asleep," he said, loosening his tie. I held out the earring. "I found this in your jacket pocket." David barely glanced at it. "Oh, that must be Rachel's. She lost it in the office the other day when we were going over the presentation. I meant to return it to her." The explanation was plausible. Rachel Peterson was his lead investor and would naturally be involved in launch preparations, but something in his too casual tone didn't ring true. "You've been spending a lot of time with her," I observed. David's expression closed off slightly. "She's our primary investor, Morgan. Of course I spend time with her. It's business. Just business." He looked at me, then his expression a mixture of annoyance and hurt. "What are you asking me exactly?" I wasn't sure what I was asking. Did I really suspect my husband of having an affair? Or was I projecting my own guilt about keeping secrets onto him? "Nothing," I said finally. "I'm tired and stressed about tomorrow. Let's just go to bed." David's face relaxed, and he kissed my forehead. "Tomorrow is going to be amazing. Trust me." I did trust him, or at least I wanted to. As we got ready for bed, I pushed my suspicions aside and focused on my plan for the next evening. Whatever doubts I had would be resolved once everything was in the open. The morning of the event, David left early to oversee the final preparations at the venue. He seemed distracted as he kissed me goodbye, his mind already at work. "I'll see you tonight," he said. 7 o'clock, don't be late." I spent the day getting ready, both mentally and physically. I had my hair and makeup done professionally, rehearsed my speech one last time, and touched base with Mr. Winters to confirm the documents were ready. By the time I slipped into my blue gown and fastened my mother's pendant around my neck, I felt prepared for whatever the evening might bring. What I couldn't have prepared for was the truth that awaited me at the launch event. The venue for David's company launch was a stunning glass-walled space on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Seattle skyline and Elliott Bay beyond. As the elevator doors opened, I was greeted by soft lighting, elegant flower arrangements, and the gentle hum of a string quartet playing in the corner. I had arranged to arrive 30 minutes before the official start time. The catering staff was putting final touches on the hors d'oeuvres displays, and tech people were testing the sound system for the presentations. Everything looked perfect. David had clearly spared no expense for this crucial event. The event planner, a woman named Stephanie, who had no idea of my true identity, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Williams, you look absolutely beautiful. David is in the small conference room down the hall, finishing up some last-minute preparations with the team." I thanked her and moved through the space, noting the carefully designed displays showcasing David's educational software. The attention to detail was impressive. Each station told part of the company story, from the initial concept sketches to testimonials from teachers who had participated in the pilot program. I felt a surge of pride in what David had accomplished. As I approached the hallway leading to the conference rooms, I noticed David standing with a woman near a tall potted plant. They were partially hidden from the main event space, but visible from my angle. The woman was striking tall and slender, with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She wore a fitted red dress that contrasted sharply with my blue one. Even from a distance, I could tell it was Rachel Peterson, David's lead investor. There was something about their body language that made me pause. They stood close together, their heads bent toward each other in an intimate posture that seemed more personal than professional. Rachel's hand rested lightly on David's arm, and he made no move to create distance between them. A catering staff member passed by, and I stepped back, not wanting to be seen. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was simply a last-minute business discussion, but my instincts told me otherwise, and the memory of the pearl earring in David's pocket flashed in my mind. Instead of approaching them directly, I followed as they moved down the hallway into a quieter area away from the preparations. I stayed back, my heart pounding as I tried to hear their conversation. "Everything looks amazing," Rachel was saying. "You've done a fantastic job, David. Tonight is going to establish you as a serious player in the education technology space." "I couldn't have done it without you," David replied. "Your guidance has been invaluable." The pause and the tone of his voice made it clear he wasn't just talking about business advice. Rachel stepped even closer to him. "Are we still on for next weekend?" she asked. "The cabin on Lake Chelan is reserved, and I've made sure the calendar looks like you're at a technology conference in Portland." My blood ran cold. Next weekend, David had told me he would be attending a tech conference in Portland. I had offered to come with him, but he had insisted it would be boring for me, just meetings and networking events. "Absolutely," David confirmed. "I can't wait to have you all to myself without looking over my shoulder." Rachel laughed softly. "She's so naive. It's almost too easy." David sighed. "She is. She has no idea what's really going on." I must have made a sound because they both turned slightly, but I had already stepped back into an alcove. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure they would hear it. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying out. "When are you going to tell her about us?" Rachel asked when they resumed their conversation. "About the real plan for the company. After we secure the next round of funding," David replied. "Then I won't need her anymore." "Won't need her anymore?" The words echoed in my head like a death knell. What did he mean? What was the real plan for the company? And how long had this been going on? As they continued talking, the pieces fell into place. Rachel wasn't just David's investor, she was his lover, and from the comfortable way they discussed their relationship, it had been going on for some time, possibly since the beginning of their business relationship. I slipped away before they could discover me finding an empty bathroom where I could catch my breath and think. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, pale, wide-eyed, on the verge of shattering. I had come here tonight to reveal my secret identity and invest millions in my husband's company. Instead, I had uncovered his betrayal. My first instinct was to leave immediately, to run from the humiliation and heartbreak. But something stopped me, a slow, burning anger that was replacing the initial shock. David and Rachel thought I was naive, easy to manipulate. Perhaps I had been, but not anymore. I splashed cold water on my wrists, reapplied my lipstick, and straightened my shoulders. I had come here tonight to make an announcement that would change everything. That plan hadn't changed, only the content of the announcement. With new determination, I texted Mr. Winters, "Change of plans. Meet me inside in 30 minutes. Then I walked back into the event space, a smile fixed firmly on my face, ready to greet the arriving guests as the supportive wife of the man of the hour. By 7:30, the launch event was in full swing. The space filled with investors, education specialists, tech journalists, and various Seattle business leaders. I played my role perfectly, smiling and making small talk while avoiding any direct contact with David or Rachel. From a distance, I watched them working the room separately, maintaining a professional distance in public, while sharing the occasional knowing glance. At 8 o'clock, the formal program began. Everyone gathered around the main presentation area, where a small stage had been set up with the company logo displayed on large screens. The event planner asked for everyone's attention and introduced David as the founder and CEO. David looked handsome and confident as he took the stage dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that I realized must have been new. His face glowed with excitement as he surveyed the crowd. He thanked everyone for coming, his voice strong and clear. 3 years ago, I had a vision, he began. A vision of educational software that could adapt to each child's unique learning style, making quality education accessible to students, regardless of their circumstances. Tonight, that vision becomes reality. He outlined the company's mission and demonstrated key features of the software platform. The presentation was polished and compelling. Under different circumstances, I would have been bursting with pride. Instead, each passionate word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. How much of this vision was genuine and how much was a calculated performance? None of this would have been possible without the support of key individuals. David continued. First and foremost, I want to thank our lead investor, Rachel Peterson, who believed in this company when it was nothing more than an idea. Rachel stepped forward to stand beside him, accepting the applause with a modest smile that made my stomach turn. She said a few words about why she had chosen to invest in David's vision, emphasizing the potential social impact of the software. Sometimes in life, you meet someone with a vision so aligned with your own that you know instantly it's the beginning of something extraordinary, she said, her eyes meeting David's briefly. Next, David acknowledged his team members one by one, thanking them for their contributions. Finally, he turned to me. And of course, I want to thank my wife Morgan, whose unwavering support has been my foundation through this journey. He extended his hand toward me, inviting me to join him on stage. Morgan, would you come up here? This was the moment I had planned for, though in a completely different context than I had imagined. I took a deep breath and made my way to the stage, accepting David's hand with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Winters had arrived as requested and stood near the back of the room, a leather portfolio under his arm. We had spoken briefly, and he understood the new direction. Morgan has been by my side through all the ups and downs. David continued, his arm around my waist. I couldn't ask for a more supportive partner. Actually, David, I said, taking the microphone from him with gentle firmness, I'd like to say a few words if that's all right. He looked surprised but nodded, stepping back slightly. I could see confusion in his eyes, as this wasn't part of the planned program. Rachel, standing at the edge of the stage, frowned slightly. First, let me say how proud I am of what David has accomplished, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The vision he described for educational technology is truly inspiring. Making quality education accessible to all children is a cause deeply important to me as well. I paused, scanning the attentive faces in the crowd. However, there's something I need to share with all of you tonight. Something I've kept hidden for too long. David shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly unsure where I was going with this. I continued before he could intervene. My name isn't Morgan Taylor Williams. Not completely, anyway. I took a deep breath. My full name is Morgan Hartwell Taylor Williams. Yes, that Hartwell. I am the granddaughter of Joseph Hartwell and the sole heir to Hartwell Industries. A collective gasp rippled through the room. I saw recognition dawn on the many faces as they made the connection to one of the wealthiest industrial families in America. David's face had gone completely white, his eyes wide with shock. Rachel looked like she'd been struck. I've lived under an assumed identity for years, wanting to experience life without the shadow of family wealth and privilege coloring every interaction. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth. I looked directly at David now. When I met David, I found someone who seemed to value me for myself. Tonight, I had planned to reveal my identity and announce a major investment in his company. Murmurs spread through the audience. David stepped toward me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and sudden calculation. I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to wait. But plans change when you discover your husband is having an affair with his investor and plotting behind your back. The room fell completely silent. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath. David froze mid-step, his face draining of what little colour remained. Rachel at the edge of the stage looked as though she might bolt for the exit. Yes, I overheard you both earlier this evening. I continued, my voice now addressing them directly. The cabin on Lake Chelan sounds lovely this time of year, much nicer than a fictional technology conference in Portland. David found his voice. Morgan, this isn't the place, isn't it? I interrupted. I think it's exactly the place. You've built this company on a vision of education and integrity. Shouldn't your investors and partners know who they're really doing business with? I turned back to the audience, many of whom were watching with undisguised fascination. I believe in the power of education to transform lives. That hasn't changed. What has changed is my understanding of who should control that power. I gestured to Mr. Winters, who approached the stage and handed me the leather portfolio. Instead of investing in David's company as planned, I am announcing the formation of a new educational technology initiative under the Hartwell Foundation. We will be developing an open-source platform that will make quality educational tools available to schools at minimal cost. The implications weren't lost on anyone in the room. I was essentially announcing a competing platform that, with Hartwell resources behind it, would potentially render David's proprietary software obsolete before it fully launched. David lunged for the microphone, but I had already stepped back, handing it to the stunned event planner. I walked off the stage with as much dignity as I could muster, making my way through the crowd of shocked faces toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear David calling my name, but I didn't look back. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sound of the chaos I'd left behind, I finally allowed the tears to fall. The Morgan who had entered that building hours earlier, trusting, hopeful in love, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't yet recognize, someone whose future had completely transformed in a single evening. I directed my driver to take me straight to our apartment. I needed to pack essential items before David returned. I had no doubt he would follow me as soon as he managed to contain the disaster at the launch event, and I wanted to be gone before he arrived. As I entered our home, a space that had felt so safe and full of promise, just hours before, everything looked different. The photographs of us smiling on hiking trips and at friends' weddings now seemed like artifacts from a fictional relationship. The comfortable furniture we had selected together, the art we had hung on the walls, the books we had shared, all of it felt like props on a stage set. I moved quickly, packing a suitcase with clothes and personal items. I gathered important documents, my real identification, financial records, the keys to a safe deposit box containing family jewelry. As I worked, my phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from David, which I ignored. I was just zipping up my suitcase when I heard his key in the lock. I had hoped to be gone before he returned, but part of me knew this confrontation was inevitable. David burst into the bedroom, his tie loosened and his face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I looked at him calmly, though my heart was racing. "I think I made myself quite clear, David." "You humiliated me in front of everyone," he shouted. "Investors, partners, the press, you destroyed everything I've worked for." "Worked for," I repeated, "or schemed for. Tell me, was sleeping with Rachel part of your business plan from the beginning, or was that a bonus that developed along the way?" David ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "It's not what you think. Rachel and I—" "Please don't insult my intelligence," I interrupted. "I heard you both. The cabin, the fake conference. She has no idea what's really going on. It was quite clear what I was hearing." His strategy shifted his anger, giving way to a more calculated approach. "Okay, yes, Rachel and I got involved. It was a mistake. I got caught up in the excitement of the business, the late nights, the pressure." He moved toward me, his expression softening. "But it didn't mean anything, Morgan. You're my wife. I love you. And now you know I'm Morgan Hartwell," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Funny how that changes things, doesn't it? A flicker of something, greed, opportunity. Recalculation passed over his face before he could mask it. "That doesn't change anything for me." "Doesn't it? When did you find out, David? Because clearly you knew before tonight." He hesitated, and I saw the moment he decided to abandon the pretense. "About 6 months ago," he admitted. "I overheard a phone call between you and your grandfather. At first, I couldn't believe it, but then I started looking into the Hartwell family and saw photographs. It all made sense, your refined tastes, the way you never worried about money despite your modest salary. And you never thought to confront me about it, I asked. I was waiting for you to tell me, he said, but we both knew it was a lie. I was hurt that you didn't trust me with the truth. So hurt that you started an affair with Rachel and made plans to leave me after securing more funding. The pieces were falling into place now. What was the real plan, David? Get me to invest in your company once I revealed my identity, then divorce me and try to keep the investment. His silence was confirmation enough. I laughed bitterly. And you call me naive? David's expression hardened. You lied to me for our entire relationship, Morgan. You created a false identity and made me fall in love with someone who doesn't exist. How is what I did any worse? The difference is intent, I said quietly. I hid my wealth because I wanted someone to love me for who I am, not what I have. You hid your affair because you wanted to use me for what I have, not who I am. I picked up my suitcase and moved toward the door. David stepped in front of me, his demeanor shifting once again. Wait, he said, his voice softer now. We can work this out. Think about it, Morgan. Together we could do amazing things. I'll end things with Rachel. It was never serious anyway. We can start fresh, be honest with each other from now on. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I had fallen in love with, the passionate educator, with a vision for helping underprivileged children, had either never existed or had been corrupted beyond recognition. What about the cabin next weekend? I asked. Weren't you looking forward to having her all to yourself, without looking over your shoulder? David flinched at hearing his own words thrown back at him. That was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, you were thinking perfectly clearly, I countered. You just didn't expect to get caught. His mask slipped, then desperation giving way to calculation. You know your announcement tonight won't really hurt me in the long run, right? The investors are already committed. And if you think you can start a competing platform, you're underestimating how much work we've already done. I'm not underestimating anything, I replied. And neither is the Hartwell legal team, who will be reviewing all of your company's patents and intellectual property claims very carefully in the coming weeks. David's face paled slightly. You wouldn't. I wouldn't have until tonight. I stepped around him, heading for the door. My grandfather was right about one thing. Money does change how people see you. I just never expected it would reveal who you truly are. So that's it, David called after me. 3 years of marriage, and you're just walking away. I turned back one last time. Our marriage ended the moment you decided I was something to be used rather than someone to be loved. Goodbye, David. As I closed the door behind me, I heard him call out, This isn't over, Morgan. But for me, it was. Whatever came next, the divorce, the legal battles, the inevitable media circus would be painful, but not as painful as staying with someone who had never truly seen me. I directed my driver to take me to the Hartwell penthouse in downtown Seattle. It had been maintained for family use, but rarely occupied in recent years. Tonight, it would be my sanctuary as I began the process of rebuilding my life from the ashes of my marriage. The first night in the Hartwell penthouse was the hardest. The space was immaculately maintained but felt cold and impersonal after years of disuse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city and the bay beyond, but I barely noticed them as I wandered through the vast rooms feeling small and lost. When the door closed behind the building manager who had let me in, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. I sank to the floor in the massive living room and sobbed until I had no tears left. I cried for the love I had lost, for the betrayal I had experienced, and for the years spent living a lie, both David's and my own. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell asleep on the sofa, still wearing my elegant blue gown from the launch event. I woke, hours later, disoriented and aching to the sound of my phone ringing. It was my grandfather. I saw the news. he said without preamble when I answered. Your dramatic revelation is all over the business pages this morning. Hartwell Heiress unmasks at tech launch, announces competing platform. Not exactly the low profile our family prefers. I wasn't surprised the story had broken so quickly. The launch had been attended by several technology journalists, and the Hartwell name was always newsworthy. I'm sorry, grandfather, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. Things didn't go as planned. His tone softened. What happened, Morgan? The articles mentioned some kind of confrontation with your husband, but the details are vague. I told him everything: the overheard conversation, the affair with Rachel David's admission that he had discovered my identity months ago and had been planning to use it to his advantage. There was a long silence when I finished. Finally, my grandfather sighed heavily. I warned you about this, but I take no pleasure in being right. I'm sorry you're hurting, my dear. I should have listened to you, I admitted. Perhaps, he agreed, but you followed your heart, and sometimes that's the only way we learn life's hardest lessons. The question now is, what will you do next? It was a good question, one I hadn't had time to consider fully in the chaos of the previous night. I don't know, I said honestly. Get a divorce, obviously. But beyond that, you made a rather grand announcement about an educational platform, my grandfather reminded me. Was that just for show, or do you intend to follow through? I considered the question. The announcement had been made in the heat of the moment, driven by hurt and a desire to strike back at David. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was genuine potential in the idea. I think I want to do it, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Not just to compete with David, but because it's a worthy goal. Quality education should be accessible to all children, not locked behind proprietary software. Then do it, my grandfather said simply. Channel this pain into purpose. It won't heal your heart overnight, but it will give you something meaningful to focus on while you recover. By the time we ended our call, I felt a small spark of determination kindling amid the ashes of my marriage. My grandfather was right. I needed purpose now, more than ever. Throughout that day, my phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls. Friends from our social circle had seen the news and wanted to know if I was okay. My colleagues at the design agency were confused and concerned. David called repeatedly, alternating between angry voicemails and pleading texts. I responded only to my closest friends, asking for space and time. To everyone else, including David, I maintained silence. I needed to process what had happened before I could face the world. The following morning, I met with my grandfather at his estate. Despite his age and declining health, Joseph Hartwell remained an imposing figure with a razor-sharp mind. He greeted me with a rare, tight hug before leading me into his study. You look terrible, he observed bluntly. But that's to be expected. Betrayal takes a physical toll. I managed a weak smile. Thanks for the vote of confidence. He gestured for me to sit across from him at his massive desk. I've asked the family lawyers to begin divorce proceedings. Given the circumstances and the evidence of his infidelity, they believe we can move quickly and protect your assets. David will fight it, I warned. Now that he knows who I am, he'll try to claim a portion of my inheritance. My grandfather's expression hardened. Let him try. The Hartwell fortune is protected by generations of careful legal planning. Your marriage may have been real, Morgan, but your identity as Morgan Taylor was a legal fiction we created with all the proper safeguards in place. His confidence was reassuring, though I knew the coming legal battle would be messy and painful. What about the educational platform I announced? I asked. I've already put together a preliminary team, he replied, sliding a folder across the desk to me. These are some of the top minds in educational technology, all with impeccable credentials and ethics. They're ready to meet with you whenever you feel up to it. I flipped through the folder, scanning the impressive resumes. You've been busy. The Hartwell name still means something in this industry, he said with a hint of pride. When people heard you were serious about this project, they were eager to be involved. For the first time since the launch event, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps some good could come from this disaster after all. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for not saying 'I told you so.'" My grandfather's expression softened. "You're not the first person to be deceived by someone you loved, Morgan, and sadly, you won't be the last. But you have something many don't in this situation, the resources and support to rebuild on your own terms." He was right, of course. My heart was broken, but my life wasn't. I still had my family, my true friends, my intelligence, and yes, the financial resources to create a new path forward. Many people facing similar betrayals had far fewer options. Over the following days, I threw myself into work, using it as both distraction and therapy. I assembled the team my grandfather had suggested and added a few names of my own educators and developers I had met through David, who I believed were genuinely committed to improving educational access. We worked long hours developing the concept for the open-source educational platform. Every minute spent focused on the project was a minute not spent dwelling on my failed marriage or the humiliating way it had ended. I moved through my days in a state of functional numbness, productive on the outside while still frozen on the inside. Meanwhile, the legal machinery of divorce ground into motion. David, as predicted, attempted to claim a substantial settlement based on his status as my husband. His lawyers argued that regardless of the identity I had used when we married, the union itself was legitimate and entitled him to a portion of my wealth. My legal team countered with evidence of his infidelity and the recording I had secretly made of his admission that he had planned to use my wealth and then leave me. The judge was not sympathetic to his claims. Still, David persisted, dragging out the proceedings with increasingly desperate tactics. He gave interviews to the press, portraying himself as the victim of my deception. "I married a woman who wasn't who she claimed to be," he told a sympathetic journalist. "Everything I thought I knew about my wife was a lie." It was a clever angle and it gained him some public sympathy, but it crumbled when Rachel Peterson, facing pressure from her own investors over her role in the scandal, released text messages showing David had known about my identity for months and had been plotting to access my fortune. With his credibility shattered, David finally agreed to a settlement that gave him nothing beyond what he had brought into the marriage. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the launch event, legally ending a relationship that had died the moment I overheard his betrayal. 6 months after the fateful launch event, I stood on a different stage, in a different venue, addressing a different audience. The Hartwell Educational Initiative was unveiling its first suite of open-source learning tools designed to be accessible to schools, regardless of their budget constraints. The event was smaller and more focused than David's lavish launch had been. We had invited educators, non-profit leaders, and technology specialists committed to educational equity. There was no champagne or string quartet, just a genuine enthusiasm for the potential impact of what we had created. "Education has the power to transform lives," I told the audience, believing every word, "but only if it reaches those who need it most. Our platform is designed with that single goal in mind, removing barriers to quality learning resources." As I demonstrated the software and outlined our implementation plans, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from my life for too long. The work was challenging and meaningful, drawing on both my design skills and my business acumen. For the first time, I was using the Hartwell name and resources in a way that felt authentically mine, not just an inheritance I had received by accident of birth. After the presentation, as I mingled with attendees, I spotted a familiar face approaching Rachel Peterson. I had heard she had faced professional consequences after the scandal broke, with several companies pulling their investments from her fund due to ethical concerns. She looked different now, less polished and confident than she had at David's launch. "Congratulations on the platform," she said, stopping a careful distance away from me. "It's impressive work." "Thank you," I replied neutrally, unsure of her agenda. Rachel glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice low. "What David and I did was unforgivable." I studied her face, looking for sincerity. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I learned my lesson the hard way," she admitted. "David wasn't just lying to you, he was lying to me too. Once your divorce was finalized, and he realized he wouldn't get any money, he dropped me immediately, moved on to another investor within weeks." I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Rachel said with a bitter laugh. "I got exactly what I deserved, but you didn't deserve any of it." She handed me a business card. "If you ever need an investor who's learned her lesson about ethics in business, I'm trying to rebuild my reputation the right way." As she walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Rachel had been part of my husband's betrayal, but she had also been deceived in her own way. David had been the architect of all of it, manipulating both of us for his own gain. Speaking of David, his company had struggled in the aftermath of the scandal. The investors who had committed before the launch had mostly stayed, but new funding had dried up as word of his personal and professional ethics spread throughout the tight-knit tech community. Last I had heard, they were scaling back their operations and looking for a buyer. I took no pleasure in his difficulties. The anger that had fueled me in the early days after our split had gradually subsided, replaced by a more complex mix of emotions, sadness for what might have been gratitude for what I had learned, and increasingly hope for what lay ahead. A few weeks after our platform launch, I attended a technology education conference in Vancouver. During a panel discussion on accessibility in educational software, I found myself engaged in a spirited but respectful debate with another panelist, a software developer named James with thoughtful ideas and a genuine passion for education. After the panel, James approached me to continue our conversation. "I really appreciated your perspective," he said. "Few people with your resources understand the realities of classroom technology the way you do." "I've made it a point to spend time in actual schools," I explained. "The best solutions come from understanding the real problems, not just the theoretical ones." We ended up talking through dinner and well into the evening. James knew exactly who I was, the Hartwell heiress, whose dramatic divorce had made headlines, but he treated me like a colleague, whose ideas he respected, not an heiress he wanted to impress. When he asked me to dinner the following evening, I hesitated. "I should be upfront with you," I said. "I'm not ready for a relationship. My divorce wasn't just a professional setback. It broke my heart." James nodded understandingly. "I'm not asking for anything more than dinner with someone I find intellectually stimulating. No pressure, no expectations." I agreed. And that dinner led to another, and then to a friendship that developed slowly and naturally over the following months. Unlike my whirlwind romance with David, this connection was built on mutual respect and complete transparency from the beginning. 1 year after the launch event that had changed everything, I found myself in a very different place than I could have imagined. The Hartwell Educational Initiative was thriving, with our platform being implemented in schools across the country. I was living openly as Morgan Hartwell, no longer hiding my identity or my capabilities, and I was beginning to open my heart again, cautiously but hopefully, to the possibility of new love. My relationship with my grandfather had deepened as well. His health had stabilized somewhat, and he took genuine interest in my work with the educational platform. "Your mother would be proud of you," he told me one evening as we reviewed the latest implementation data. "She always believed education was the great equalizer." The pain of David's betrayal hadn't disappeared completely. I don't think such wounds ever heal without leaving scars, but the experience had taught me valuable lessons that I might never have learned otherwise. I had learned that secrets, even those kept with good intentions, create barriers to genuine connection. By hiding my identity from David, I had made it impossible for him to truly know me, just as his deception had prevented me from seeing him clearly. I had learned that trust must be earned over time through consistent actions, not just passionate declarations. James was proving this daily, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, always being exactly who he claimed to be. Most importantly, I had learned that losing what I thought was everything had freed me to discover who I truly was and what I wanted from life. The painful revelation at David's launch event had been the catalyst for growth I might never have experienced otherwise. Now, as I looked toward the future, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon: genuine optimism. My path forward wasn't the one I had envisioned when I walked into that launch event a year ago, but perhaps it was better, more authentic, more purposeful, and ultimately more mine. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a betrayal or major life change? How did you find your way forward? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of discovery resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might be going through their own difficult transformation. Remember, sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something better. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to embrace your own fresh starts, whatever they may be.